Welcome to the Healthy Family Project podcast. I'm your host, Amanda. I'm a mom of two and passionate about bringing parents and caregivers useful and digestible information to help make this journey just a little easier, more fun, and of course with some laughs. I love digging deep into topics and sharing my own struggles and successes with our listeners. I can't wait to share this journey with you. Hi, and welcome to the Healthy Family Project podcast. I'm your host, Amanda. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome, welcome. We recently started showcasing our episodes on YouTube. So if you're watching me live, or I guess not live, but if you're watching me in video form, hello. If you're listening via audio, hello to you too. But I will say we do have, this is our 87th episode. So please go back. We have a lot of great topics that we've covered over the years, and a lot of those are applicable even now. Mental health, how to shop on a budget, you name it. We're there for families, and we've covered a lot of the hot topics in the space. So today we are talking all about, well, we're talking with a teacher, which is pretty cool. She's going to fill us in on what families need to know, I guess, or what teachers wish parents and families knew that maybe they don't. So simple things, some fun stuff. And we're talking to Heather Brickell, and she is a teacher, as I mentioned, a mom, and she's also the author of mysweetsavings.com. So she has a lot of perspective to share, and we are going to talk through some of those points. But before we jump in, quick note, if you don't follow us on social media, please go ahead and give us a follow. We are on Instagram. We are on TikTok. We are on Facebook. We do have a Facebook group that's specific for our podcast, and I'm in that group, and most of our guests are in that group as well. So if you wanted to ask a question of one of the guests that we've had on our podcast, you can do that over there. You can give topic ideas, just weigh in. We want to hear from you. Definitely get over there and jump in on that conversation. If you visit our website, healthyfamilyproject.com, we have developed, I want to say, more than 600 recipes now. All of those approved by a registered dietitian, and nutritious and delicious. Most of them I've actually made myself at my own house. And if you're a listener, you know I have a selective eater. So check those recipes out. You can easily search by, what you're looking for, whether it be ingredient or, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. We have all of those over there. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk with Heather. I am so excited to have you with us today. We are in the back to school season, so perfect timing for our topic. If you're listening to this or watching this, now that we have our video broadcast at back to school time, this will be helpful, but I do think our topic will be helpful for families at any time of the year. So before we jump in, Heather, can you tell our listeners and viewers now a little bit about you?
Sure. Thank you so much, Amanda, for having me. I appreciate it. So I reside in Tampa, Florida, with my husband, Keith. We've been married for 23 years, and we have two boys. Brady is 11 and Drew is 17. So I feel like this coming school year is kind of a lot of firsts for us in some ways. Brady's going to middle school, and then Drew is a senior in high school, and he'll be going off to college. So I'm kind of
I know we're kind of in this. We're in and I have the two girls, so we're in similar seasons of life.
Exactly. I'm excited, but I'm also a little sad. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes, I know. I know the feeling.
Yeah. And then I also teach part-time at my youngest son's school. After the pandemic, I got the teaching itch to go back to school. So it's been awesome.
Wonderful.
And then I blog at mysweetsavings.com. I share recipes, frugal tips and ideas. I love to cook when I'm not busy teaching and chasing after the boys. So I'm busy, but it's a
Yes.
lot of fun.
It sounds like it. And I am excited. Our topic today, which you so graciously wrote a blog post for us on our website over at healthyfamilyproject.com. 10 things teachers wish parents knew during the school year. And I
Mhm.
love this topic. So we're going to get through, I don't know that we'll get through all 10, but we do have the blog post up there, but we can kind of jump in and start with the list and see where we land within our 30 minutes. But I really am excited to hear what you have to say because I often, and especially with our first one, which is communication, where I'm like, is this too much? Is this too little? Am I,
Yep.
like, do they not want to hear from me anymore? So let's
Mhm.
start there. Let's start with your
Okay.
first of the top 10 things teachers wish parents would knew during the school year. That's our title. Yeah.
Yeah.
So jump in communication.
Okay. So to me, communication is like the number one vital thing between a parent and a teacher. Um, Even speaking from a parent's perspective, I feel like the more that I communicate with my child's teacher, the better relationship that we have, right? And we're going into the new school year. So I think it's vital that at the beginning of the year that you start right away having good communication, because when you have those challenging situations,
Yes.
I feel like you already have a great relationship established with that parent or the parent with the teacher. Um, and so, when Johnny does something that, he's not supposed to do, you can go to that parent. You have that established relationship, and I feel like they accept it much easier. So
Right.
communication is, I think it's vital between parents and teachers.
And would you say, well, you have 11 and 17. So was there a point where you weren't communicating as much with teachers as your older son kind of went into that new phase?
Yes, because as they're becoming older, I feel like they're becoming more responsible too. So I feel like
Yes.
the communication kind of falls on them when they get to be
Right.
old. Now, if there's a situation, obviously the teacher is going to get in touch with me, and I'll communicate with them. But I feel like as they get older, that responsibility it falls on them a lot, you know.
I agree. And I've had guts. I want to say slap on the wrist, but the
Oh no.
saying. Um, Definitely whenever my oldest went to high school and I reached out to a teacher on something and they said, we really at this point would prefer that they address this with us
Mhm.
and we can involve you. And I was like, oh geez, I'm being ousted.
Yeah.
But that made a lot of sense to me. I was appreciative actually of that feedback because I stopped and thought for a second, that,
Mhm.
but I will say, um, with, the space we're in right now with students and mental health and things like that, I would encourage parents if you do have an older student and you are, seeing maybe going
Yeah.
through some of those things. I know I've reached out and just said, hey, if things start to seem off, like, could you
Yes.
just shoot me a note? And so I've had teachers be very receptive, and I know other parents who have dealt with some, maybe mental
Yes.
health challenges, and before it gets to, you know what I mean, like where all of a sudden you're like, oh, you're failing the class and you didn't do any of the work.
That's yes, that's right. And you know what? That's like, I tell Drew too, if you have a problem, don't be embarrassed or whatever to go to your teacher. I feel
Yes.
like sometimes when kids get older, that not that they're too cool, but they are sometimes, but they just think that, oh, I'm not going to go to that teacher. I'm not going to go to my parents. But how else can we help you with the
Yes.
problem? Right. And we're trying to prepare them for adulthood, when they get out to be on their own, when they're in college, they're not going to
Yeah.
have us there with them. Right.
Yeah. I
So
know. Well, and they have
communication.
to, yeah, they have to be an advocate for themselves. And
That's right.
so I tell both of my girls that, if you have a question about a grade, Or you have a
Exactly.
question, you look online and you say, you know what, that doesn't seem right. I know I turned that in. Why is it marked
Mhm.
late? I said, don't just let it go because teachers, you know this, are so busy and have so many students to look after in the digital space, and who knows what kind of error there could be. An error, I mean, it could be you turned your work in late, but
Yeah,
it
no,
could
exactly.
it could be something in the system or whatever. And I know that both of them have had instances where they weren't going to say something, or they weren't going to ask the question, and they did, and it ended up being resolved. Like, "Oh, I forgot you did that extra credit," or like, "I didn't note that, so thank you for bringing it to my attention."
Yep. And you know what? As teachers, we want our students to communicate with us about those things, right? That's how we know how we can best help them, with testing, with quizzes, and now speaking from a parent's perspective, like what you were saying, I've had situations where I've gotten an online notification for one of my boys and it said, "Oh, your son got this grade." I'm like,
Don't
"Wait,
you love don't you love those?
I know
Especially
exactly."
especially when they're I don't wanna say that's always incorrect, but, like, technology, we talked about this,
Yes,
microphone and everything, it's like,
exactly.
okay, and I had to really learn a tough lesson, like you're saying, that not to when I get that notification, not to, like, have the heart attack.
Yes, exactly, because it could be an error. And
Could be, yeah.
I have emailed, my boys' teachers before, and there has been an instance where it was not correct. And so like you said, you don't know unless you ask. So I think that's important, from the teacher and the parent perspective, and, for communication.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, communication is vital. Now
Yes.
let's talk about reinforcement.
Yep. So reinforcement is so important. You want your children to continue learning those things that they're learning at school. You want them to continue those at home, right? So, any way that you can teach reinforcement to your children, whether it's, you go to Target and you're owed money back or whatever, have your child, double check the money if you're not using a debit card. I know nowadays everything we're using
Yeah.
debit cards, we're not using cash, but have them count the money back. Have them read the signs, the billboards, as you're going around town. And I think we'll talk about this later, or you can read it on the blog post, but it's vital for learning. Reading is the foundation of, I feel like, of all other academic success. So find reinforcement, with your children, ways to get them to read. I know during the summer, your kids, they don't want to read, but take your kids to the library. My youngest son still loves to go to the library. Have them check out books, make them read so much per day before they can play those video games. So reinforcement is so important. And I think when you have your children show you those things at home that they're learning at school, it shows them that you're taking interest in what they're learning too, right? So I think that's important.
It is, and I have found whenever I will say, "Well, like, teach me what did you do in this class?"
Oh,
And teach me. Oh, the
yep,
kids love to tell us what to do. So, mine will be
exactly.
like, "Oh, well, okay." I'm like, "Well, I have no idea how to do that." And then I feel like it has helped them also foundationally learn, even like keep that knowledge by teaching it back to me. And
Yes.
one of I now that I'm saying that, I feel like my oldest had an algebra teacher in middle school that suggested that have her teach, because she was struggling a little bit, and have so he said have her
Yep.
teach you this, what she's doing right now, and that was so helpful.
Yes. And yes, like especially in the younger grades, like when they're learning multiplication facts and addition facts, subtraction facts, I've learned that those are key. Those are stepping stones to
But
all
mhm.
the other math that they're going to be learning. So find fun ways to teach your children those math facts, because those are vital. But reinforce those on a daily basis. Have them start saying the multiplication table from the beginning, then have them start maybe from the end.
Right.
So just find fun ways to reinforce. So it doesn't really seem like it's a chore to them or a job.
Right.
You want to make it fun. You
Yeah.
want to make learning fun. So I think that's important when it comes to reinforcement.
And mine have had a little bit of their own money to spend this summer taking on little odd jobs. My
Yep.
youngest is watering plants for people and, babysitting, and my oldest is doing some camp counseling. But we were just on a trip and out of state, and the sales tax is different from here, and they had questions, and they're
Awesome.
like, "Wait, why is this price?" And so I'm like, "Well, look at your receipt." And like, what?
Yep.
They were like amazed. One of those things that
Yes,
it's part of life, but right, like you
that's
don't.
right.
Where it's like a surprise. You're an adult, and now you got to pay these taxes.
Exactly. Exactly. Or, have your kids help you in the kitchen when
Oh,
it comes
that's a
to
great one.
baking.
Yep,
Using the measuring spoons and the measuring cups, have them measure out. That will really help them learn those math facts too.
yeah,
And it's fun for them. So I
yeah.
think it's all about making learning fun. That's so important to kids these days.
I
So
agree. And my youngest, we were on a bit of a road trip, the three of us, and she hasn't been wanting to read very much this summer. And I had one question. The girl is obsessed with Marvel, and I had
oh,
one question because she's had me watching it with her, and I don't even remember what it was. And so she said, "Oh, well, let me read you the history." It was like 30 minutes later, and the older one was like, "When is she gonna stop?" And I'm like,
yeah.
"This is great." I'm like, "Just let her read, please." Like, she is actually
Oh, yeah.
reading and loving it and loving sharing the information, reading it to
Yeah.
us, and she's interested in it. And so I was like, "Just let her go. Let her read the whole car ride if she wants to."
Exactly. And I think sometimes our kids will amaze us, right? With the things that they come home learning at school. So we need to continue that excitement.
Yeah, for
For
sure.
like
Reinforce.
my oldest son, he's into like aeronautical and SpaceX, NASA, that type of thing. And so he gets excited when there's a launch or whatever. So one thing that I have learned is to try to get excited, with him, because
With him.
that's what he likes. My youngest son, he wants to be an airline pilot when he when he gets older. So, we love to go to the airport and watch planes. So I think it's important to get excited about the things that your kids are, that they're interested in, and that will help reinforce those things that they're learning at school too.
I love that. That's a really good advice. Okay, next up, realistic expectations.
Yep.
I had to learn a hard lesson on this one, but
Oh,
I'll let
really?
you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know as a parent, it's so easy to take this to the extreme, right? We want our kids to have a 4.0. We want our kids to be on the principal's list. We want our kids to, excel in every area. But we have to remember that there's realistic expectations that each child has. Every child is going to be different, and as me, as a teacher, I see this in the classroom too, right? Every kid is different. Every kid's learning style is going to be different. The way that they take in material, some kids, they can't sit still for a minute, right? They have to see things before they do it. We need to have realistic expectations. So, for example, my oldest son, he's like really good in math and science. My younger son, he's better at things like reading, you know. So I just need to encourage them with those things that, that they're good in, but don't have a crazy expectation, for something that they can't achieve. You don't want them to be, you know, let down, and you don't want them to see that you're putting them down because maybe they can't answer this hard math problem. You know what? That's who they are, and we need to accept them for who they are and encourage them at what they're good at. So have realistic expectations. I think it's so important that our kids see that.
Yeah, and you said something, they're all different, they're all individuals. So I think as a parent, from the parent side of things, recognizing, you know, they're not you, they're their own person. So
That's
you're
right.
not creating another you. This was like my thing where I'm like, well, I do that and I like that. And here's how I would do it, and then you
Yep.
start thinking like, but that's me, and we're totally different, and
Yep.
recognizing that, yes, grades are very, very important.
Mhm.
You need to take school seriously and give effort and all of those things. But I think just realizing that, like, that's not the whole person, and
Yes,
letting your
exactly.
kids know or your students know, like, there's so many gifts,
Yep.
being kind and being helpful and problem solving in a way that, are leading a team or communicating,
Yep.
whatever those things. There's so many gifts that at the end of the day, you may score a C on your test,
That's
but
right.
there's these other things that are beautiful and amazing and are
Mhm.
going to bring you success in life just the
I
same.
agree with you. And you know what? If you got a C and that's the best that you can do, that's all I'm going to ask of you. You know what? Maybe you're not going to be an A student. That's fine. As long as you're doing your best. I think that's so important that we reinforce that to our kids. Just do your best in everything, and like you said, I feel like characteristic traits, those are way more important than
Yeah.
grades. Being kind, being helpful to the teacher, being patient with your fellow classmates. Um, I feel like those go such a long way, but just do your best. And that's what I tell my boys all the time.
Yeah. And also, not to get off of our realistic expectations, I just had a conversation with someone else about this. I'm like, what are your skills? I've been asking them, like, what is your, like, what's in your deck of cards that you would like, what would you play? Because, even as you move into adulthood and you have a resume or that you have that section for skills or whatever.
Mhm.
But I always, we were laughing because I was like, well, can you do a one-handed cartwheel? Like, can you, like, like little, like, funny things. Can you hold your breath underwater for a minute? Like, what are your skills? Like, when you think about, and then we went kind of more into like, how are you helpful to your friends, or like you, the,
Yes.
person that someone can bring their confide in or whatever it might be. So we talked through what those skills were because I was not trying to get away from like grades, but
Yeah.
saying like, this doesn't define you, as a person.
No, not at all. But characteristics, I think, in a lot of ways, that'll get you so much farther, right? Than maybe a good grade or whatever. People see if you're kind and you're helpful. And but like you said, every person, they have their own skills that they're good at.
Yeah.
And we just need to encourage them to do what they're good at. And I think that's a realistic expectation.
And I think when you have the realistic expectations, you'll see things
That's right.
because you won't have that weight and that stress and that,
Yep.
like, burden of like, I'm going to disappoint someone. You
Yes.
just go into it like, here I am. And this is like, I'm going to do my thing. And you don't have that, like, I mean, I guess a little amount of pressure is probably healthy, but, you don't have that extra stress. You might even gain some confidence by knowing, like,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah. Well, I think, when we have realistic expectations for our kids, that what that makes them strive to want to do even better. I think,
right.
if we are complimenting them and praising them on those things that they're good at, you know and even those things that they're not good at, I always try to take a negative and turn it around with a positive, right? um then that's gonna, they're gonna be like, oh, you know what,
Hmm.
she sees this good in me. And so that's going to want to make them strive to do
Right.
even better. So,
Yeah. So good stuff. All right. Realistic expectations. Next up, we have independence. And for those parents who might be control freaks, and I'm not going to say any names, but
I am a little bit of a control freak too. I'm not gonna lie. Even though I'm a teacher, I'm also a control freak when it comes to
Oh,
parenting.
I try.
Back to the homework thing. So this is where, we have to let their independence start to come into play, especially like with my youngest. He's going into middle school this year, and
Yeah.
even last year in fifth grade, like, we were talking about getting those messages about the assignments, and I'm like, Brady, your teacher is trying to prepare you now, because next year when you're in middle school, the responsibility level is going to have to be taken up a notch. And so I don't know if he quite gets that yet. And so that's what my husband and I are trying to enforce in him, that, you're going to be a much more independent person in middle school. And, they're getting computers to do their work on.
I know.
So it's like, I can't really, see as much of the
It's
work that
tough,
you're doing.
right?
So it's going to be on you. So I think teaching your kids independence, it's very important. And then, when they get into high school, as we were talking about earlier, the responsibility thing, right? They're much more independent when they're in high school. They're pretty much handling everything. I can still go on and I'll look at the grades, and but independence is so important, because they're going to be going off and, to the world soon, and they're going to be having jobs and in college. And so by promoting independence, I think that's really going to help them to go far.
Yeah, and I think that, and my husband will tell me this, but this was a hard, see, this is like a therapy session for me. But another hard thing that I had to learn was it's really hard to watch your kids fail at anything when it could have been something that you may have been able to step in and not
I
have
know.
it that happen. But he would tell me they have to know what it feels like to
That's right.
fail or make that mistake, or they have to know what that feels like in order to know not to want to feel that way. But when they're constantly like a safety net coming underneath them so that they don't have to face those,
Mhm.
they don't have to be independent in that way,
Yep.
then it's going to be a recipe for disaster, because life isn't that way, right? Like we don't
That's
have,
right.
I don't
Yep.
wake up and have a safety net. So
No, I know. And you know what? Unfortunately, life is full of failures and hard times. And, I feel like you said, things are gonna happen. And by teaching them independence when these things come, it's preparing them for, down the road. And sometimes it's not always the outcome that we want to see with them. Maybe they failed a test, or they got in trouble at school. But I think as they get older, especially, we need to teach them how to handle those problems on their own, because we're not, like you said, the safety net, we're not always going to be there. So it's so important. It's hard though.
So, from a teacher perspective with independence,
Mhm.
how would you, I guess, advise a parent from your side? Like, you wish that they, maybe, is it just you wish that they knew that that independence was more important, maybe, I guess? Just trying to
Yeah.
think how you,
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And a lot of parents still, like, they want to do the work for their kids,
yeah.
and that's not teaching them to be, a good adult, right? You have to teach them to do their own homework. Like with my son, he knows as soon as we get home from school, he's going to do his homework first before he does anything. And I would encourage, as a teacher, um, I guess this is my viewpoint as a teacher, but encourage parents to, have their students do their work first thing. That way, they get it done, they get it out of the way, then they can enjoy the rest of the evening. But they need to become independent. Mom and dad, shouldn't be doing their work for them. As teachers, we can tell when parents
Yeah.
do their children's work. They need to be independent. They need to do it on their own so they can be good adults, later down the road.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, someone once told me if, and I guess because they have computers, this doesn't happen as much anymore, but if your kid calls you from school that they forgot their homework, that
Yes.
you don't, maybe you do it once and let
Mhm.
them know, like, if this happens again, I'm sorry,
Yep.
but you're going to have to. And then, and I did it, even though it was super painful. And I don't think she ever forgot her homework again after that, like,
Yes.
or a neighbor of mine was like a band instrument or something, and she could have taken it over, to the
Yeah.
school, and she didn't. And she was like, this is killing me that I could take this and I'm not.
Yep.
And she was like, but I know he'll never forget it again because he has to
That's
sit there now
right.
without it.
That's right. And the same thing has happened, to my boys too. They've forgotten a book or their planner or whatever, and they got deducted for it. And I'm like, oh, Mom, I'm like, you know what? You have to be
Yeah.
responsible before we leave in the morning for school. That needs to be the first thing that you need to do is to check and make sure you have everything you need in your backpack, right? That way you're not going to forget anything. And once again, going back, every child is different in the way that they learn. So you may have to reinforce independence, you
Right.
know, in some different ways. So,
I
but it's
know.
important.
Yeah. And I know, like I said, I wanted to be that safety net for
Yeah.
my girls. And
Oh, we all want to be.
I had to, it was super hard to break that, um, and then even when sometimes when they still like want me to, maybe do a little more than I should
Yes,
be doing. I'm like, I
Mhm.
no, I'm not the one taking algebra right now. Like, why would I? I already
Exactly.
paid my dues. I believe
Yeah,
me, I do not
exactly.
want to take algebra again. I promise.
I know when it comes to math, that's not really my
No.
forte.
Oh,
So,
no, me either. So,
oh,
okay, let's see. I think we have time for one more here. So
okay.
let's look at support.
Okay. Yeah. So,
Teachers need support right now, right?
oh man, this is a good one. Let me tell you. Um, Happy parents make happy teachers. And if if you're happy as a parent, I'm happy as a teacher. And one of the ways that we do that is by supporting our teachers, right? Let them know that you're supporting their, everything that they're doing with your child. You may not agree with it, but if your teacher knows that you're supporting them, let me tell you, that means more than a gift card at teacher appreciation. If you support your child's teacher, send them a note during the school year and just let them know what a great job they're doing. It goes such a long way when you have support for your child's teacher. I think when times do get tough, and maybe there's a situation with that child, as long as you have the support of that parent, I think that that goes a long, long way. And to me, it's
Yeah.
support is huge. So let
I
your
always, as a parent, I always try to use the language of, you know, especially in corresponding with emails, like,
Mhm.
how can what can I be doing at home
Yep.
to better this
Yeah.
situation or whatever it might be. It's not necessarily that. And I always close out my emails with thank you for all you do,
Yep.
or like, and it truly is. It's not just me being, cliche and saying thank you for all you do, or like have a wonderful day. It's
Yes.
not the just typical. It truly is. I want the teachers to know that, like, you, and from my time my kids went into kindergarten till now I have a senior, you know,
Yep.
you have, you're shaping the future of
Yeah.
our society, and it's a big job. And you have, like we talked about earlier, all these different kids and all these different personalities. And even just the fact that you're taking this time to talk to
Mhm.
me about my individual student, means so
Sure,
much to
sure.
me.
And I think it's important too that, you know what, as parents, don't talk bad about your child's teacher in front of
No.
them. You
Oh,
know, we
no.
may not agree with what they do, and but if you talk bad about your child's teacher in front of them, they have that mindset.
Yep.
They're going to school with that mindset. Oh, well, my mom isn't behind my teacher, so why do I need to be behind my
Mhm.
teacher? Right. So, like I said before, always take a negative and put it back with a positive. You know, if your child says something about your teacher, you know, you need to go back and say, you know what, your teacher, they're giving their time to teach you. And, you know, we're not going to talk bad about them. Your teacher is, they're helping you to be the person that you're going to become, you
Yeah.
know, in life. But I would say that's a big thing with me. Don't talk bad about your child's teacher in front of them, because it just really does put that mindset with them, I feel like.
Yep.
Um, so I think it's real important.
And that
Um,
goes back to the what we talked about earlier about the um confidence building and that positivity and things like that. Like if you're set up in that negative space and going into a classroom, as an elementary student for a full day and you're going in that negative
yeah,
space and you're going to constantly be shifting to that negativity and that'll reflect through in all that you produce or everything you do that year.
that's right. That's spot on. It's so true. But support your child's teacher. They need it. Listen, teachers really, their job is more than 9 to 5. You
Oh,
know,
I know.
teachers work basically 7 days a week. You know, even through the night when I was teaching full time, you know, I remember lesson plans and working all
Right.
weekend. And I don't think a lot of people realize that when it comes to teaching. So give the teachers the support that they need. And like I said, just drop them a note and let them know how much you appreciate them. It's worth more than $1,000. I promise you.
Well, and I'll even have the girls, and I know again with the digital age, it's like so painful to
I
handwrite
know.
something, but I'm like, please, I've had them say, well, that teacher really helped. Like, I really enjoyed learning about this, and here's why. And there's been several of those over the years, and I have had them write just a little note card that says, exactly what they shared with me. Cause I'm like, I feel like this would be like that bright spot, knowing that, what the impact that they're making, and I try to mention that to teachers too when I interact. Like, I will give an example of like, oh, she mentioned you guys learned about blah, blah, blah. And she really enjoyed the way that that was shared with the class and came home and actually had me watch that video about
Yeah.
this whatever
Oh,
war
yeah.
you were,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
So I'm like, yeah, so I learned something too. But and
Yep.
I think it's all interconnected, the support and the communication and,
Mhm.
like you said, being upfront at the beginning. Right now, when we're recording this, we'll be heading into the school year, even an introduction email.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, that's a great idea. Just to tell them, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here
Yeah.
to support you. You know, maybe you could even tell your child's teacher up front, you know, this is something that my son or my daughter struggles with. Can you help me keep an eye on that? Kind
Yes,
of like what you said
that's
when it comes to
yep. I
emotional.
have used that opportunity at the beginning of the year just to say, "Hey, if you see something, let me know." Because
Exactly.
I don't, and especially as they get older, like we said, it tends to be more communication when they're younger. We do
Yep.
have to give them that independence, but you also don't want to get into a situation where things are really bad and
Yes.
then you're like, "Okay, how did this happen? Like, how did we get from here to
Exactly.
here?" Whereas
Yeah.
if we could have, like, talked about it when we're here, then we
Hmm?
might have been able to.
Oh, yeah, and that way, you know, if your teacher knows to look for that thing at the beginning of the year, then they can help that child with that area or be on the lookout and inform you right away when they see that something is off, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but that's so important. But I think that's a great idea is to send an email at the beginning of the year.
And I think even things like, my student, like, encourage them to ask, but like they do better sitting in the front of the class, or, things
Yeah.
like that. Those little tips for teachers, because as a parent, I'm like thinking, okay, I know my kid. Like, I
Mhm.
know them inside and out. And
Mm.
I can say up front, hey, they probably are going to lose focus if they're sitting
Yeah,
back there in the corner by the window with all their friends around them. Like, they need to be,
exactly. Ex-
and so if you know those things, I think I've always shared that with teachers. I don't know, as a teacher standpoint, if you think that's helpful to know those like little
Oh,
things like, hey, they
that
have a
is.
tendency to want to go to the bathroom all the time.
Mhm.
They have
Yeah,
some anxiety or whatever. And so while they should
exactly.
be allowed to use the bathroom, it's, just so it's
Yeah.
like,
Even I find sometimes if there's situations going on at home, maybe with mom
yes,
and dad, or emotional situations with other family members, or just death, things like that. If I know that that's going on as a teacher, that's going to help me, because I notice a lot of times with kids, if things are going on at home,
yeah,
that really affects their
of
attitude
course.
and
Yeah,
how they act. So I think it's vital as a teacher to know those things. But yeah.
good. No, I think that's a good place for us to close out, because I feel
Okay.
like we went over a lot, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
that
So
it all interconnected so beautifully. I feel I don't even know how many we got through, maybe 5 or 6, but we do have
yeah.
10 on the website, on the blog post. So if you
Yeah.
want to head over there to healthyfamilyproject.com, we have a ton of back to school content, a ton of back to school um lunchbox ideas or after school snacks, because I know, we've all been kind of enjoying these summer months, and then it's
I
going to
know.
be like, every night. I'm enjoying this, not having somewhere to run every single night. But yeah,
I
check
know.
those out. And then, do you have anything? Where can people find you?
Yes, so you can find me at mysweetsavings.com,
Okay.
and I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, the new Threads.
Oh, joy.
I know. So you can find me on all social media at My Sweet Savings. So I share recipes, frugal ideas, beauty, healthy tips, things like that. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And then Heather has contributed to our blog recently, so you can find that post there. And then we also are on all of the things. You can find Healthy Family Project on Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, and I think we're on Threads and TikTok. We also do TikTok. So
Okay.
if you look for us, you will find us. And I think Heather, you're gonna have to come back and do another podcast here
I
in the
love
fall.
it.
All right.
Yeah, that'd be great. Maybe we can talk about college stuff.
Yeah, I need some help in that area, but not
Oh,
for me. I
I know.
feel like
Yeah, we're done with that, right? We're
yeah,
passing the torch.
passing the torch. Yeah. All right.
Oh,
Well, thank you so much
yeah.
for joining me, and yeah, let's reconnect here again.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I appreciate it.
Thank you.